Hello, mamas, and welcome back to the Pregnancy with Physio Laura podcast. Today's episode picks up where we left off in sharing the second half of my birth story. So this episode begins from the pushing phase right through to the events that occurred after my birth. So this is episode 3 of 7 in my Pregnancy and Birth podcast series. And if you haven't already listened to the first 2 episodes, you should definitely go and listen to them before today's episode. Because in the first episode, I explain my pregnancy journey, which then gives context to my birth story. And in the second episode, I explain the first half of my birth story. So definitely go catch up on those. Otherwise, this episode really won't make much sense to you. Now, in today's episode, I share my experience of the pushing phase of birth and how it wasn't exactly what I expected. I also get a little teary when I'm talking about the moment I met my daughter, and I certainly wasn't expecting to get emotional when I recorded this, but obviously there were still some emotions I needed to release. Now, let's get into episode 3 of this 7-part pregnancy and birth series, chatting all about the second half of my birth story. Enjoy! So I laboured in the water between side lie and being on my knees, leaning over the edge. And then during one of my contractions, I just stood bolt upright. I just instinctivly stood bolt upright, and I thought that was interesting. And turns out this was the start of my pushing phase. So I only know from the photos in my camera roll what the time frame was, but roughly this was about, she was born at 2:30 that day, and I think I stood bolt upright at about 1 or 1:30. My pushing phase ended up being about 45 minutes. So I stood bolt upright and I started having some contractions and I started wanting to squat. So I wanted to really squat down in a standing position, squat down into it. And I was holding onto my husband and I wanted him to be like this steady tree, like an immovable object that I could just pull on, if you can visualize that. I'd probably share the pictures, but they're all really real nudie pics, so I probably won't share these ones. But that was another thing. I thought I would labour in like a pretty lacy black bra or something, full naked. I was like, I don't want to wear a bra at a birth pool. No, I get everything off. So all my pictures are nudie pics. So I was pulling on him with all my might, and the poor guy... I was a good 90 kilos or so, and he said that was the strongest he had ever felt me. I was so strong and I was bearing down. I was pulling on him, and God forbid if he collapsed in any way, shape or form, I would scream at him, "Stop collapsing, stop, stand upright." And he's like, "I'm sorry, I'm trying." And it was in this phase of my labor where I was squatting down, bearing down, pulling on him, trying to counteract that pressure, that I bit him. Oh God. So I was just feeling like that I had this, power and this I just need to get it out. And that resulted in me biting him, and I didn't mean it. And it just came out, but right next to his nipple, I'm talking 5 centimeters from his nipple, I gave him a really good bite as I was pulling down, and I felt really bad, but at the same time, I needed to bite something. So it was either going to be him or a towel or something, and he was just the closest thing to me. So, I'm sure there's a million stories about people getting injured in labor, but it was just this primal reaction. I needed to grit my teeth on something. And then I started to feel this overwhelming sense to bear down. And that was the first time I think I truly acknowledged, oh wow, I'm going to have a baby today. And that gave me a real boost of energy and a real boost of adrenaline, because I finally could see some light at the end of the tunnel. And I could see that, okay, we're in the afternoon, it's lunchtime, my baby is going to be born today. It's not going to take another 8 hours, surely. So I started to feel better. I started to feel a bit of excitement. I started to feel like good energy. I wasn't questioning anymore. When is this going to happen? How long? I wasn't feeling sorry for myself. I was actually starting to feel excited. Now, with the bearing down, like I said, I imagined it would be like doing a poo, and it was not at all like that for me. So I never questioned, am I doing a poo or am I having a baby? And maybe that's because of my knowledge of birth and anatomy and all of that. But what it did feel like is when you do a vomit and you heave, and it's just that primal abdominal contraction, you can't control it. It was like that times 100 million energy, force, power of it. I've never had that sort of energy and that power And it wasn't in my control. Not in an out of control sort of way, but just I wasn't trying to force it. I wasn't trying to have that power or that pressure. It was just happening. And that was great. So I was like, oh, fantastic. This baby is moving down. Now, I don't know how long that went on for, but like I said, the total, according to my camera roll, was about an hour or so. So I think the actual pushing phase was maybe 45 minutes. It wasn't very long, which was great. So I did that in standing for a little bit, and then I felt the need to drop to my knees. So I got on my knees in the pool and I continued to have those really forceful bearing down contractions. And by this stage, I think my husband, because of the spillage of water issue, he sat on a chair and put his feet in the water. So he was like over the edge, and then I leant on his knees. And I don't know how I didn't stretch or break his clothing, because I was gripping on for dear life when I was getting the contraction and that bearing down pressure. Like, the amount of force I was putting through my hands and trying to pull was pretty intense. So we did that. And then I felt the ring of fire and I thought, amazing. Like, there is an actual human child about to come out. This is incredible. The ring of fire for me didn't feel as intense as I expected. So I was aware of it, but it wasn't a overly intense, burning, uncomfortable sensation. It was just, okay, I can feel there's a stretch there, but I didn't find it sore or terribly uncomfortable. It was just an awareness. And so then I thought the rest would be easy. So I thought once the ring of fire happened, that the slippery fish baby would just jump on out. But it was a little bit tougher than that in terms of I still had to really work to get Bubs out. She was a big girl. So then at that stage, I was trying to bear down as if I was doing a poo. So I was trying to channel that energy. That was how I was bearing down. But again, it was happening instinctually. I wasn't forcing it. So I was only ever just encouraging it when I was having a contraction. I wasn't forcing something that wasn't there. I was only ever bearing down when I was having a contraction, and I was just trying to direct, I guess, the angle of the contraction. I just was trying to direct it towards my bottom as if I was about to do a poo. That's just what I was going with. And it was effective and it was working. So I think I did try to reach inside to see if I could feel a head occasionally. But to be honest, I thought I would be excited to do that, but it actually just felt quite annoying. I just wanted it to be done. I didn't really care to feel if baby was there or not, because I knew that she was coming. And I do have video footage of me saying like, come on, just come out. And not because I was in pain, or I think I was so close and I just wanted to hit that finish line. I wanted to meet my baby, and I think I was just being impatient. So the one thing my doula had said is that once the head comes out, just try and slow it down if you can. So the idea behind that is that sometimes you can get that overwhelming urge to then just want to push the body out, and we wanted to protect the perineum and make sure that we didn't tear. So I was aware of that. In saying that, in the end, I didn't really need to slow it down because my body just did it well. But the head then came out, and that was incredible. So it still felt really surreal, but there was just something about the head being out that was amazing. It was like, I can't describe it. It was, can't really put it into words, but that felt amazing. And then I was conscious of not then rushing the next bit. So I was, I think, doing some panting, but for the most part, my body didn't go too fast for this phase anyway. So then I could feel that I need to put a little bit of effort in to get the shoulders out. And then once those shoulders came out, it was that typical slippery fish. Baby came out into the water. I was on my knees, so she came out in front of me. And I grabbed her, I put her up onto my chest, and then I flipped over. So then I was sitting against the birth pool with her on my chest, and it was amazing. So I have this beautiful video of this part, and it makes me cry just watching it. But I was relieved. I think honestly that was my number one emotion. I was in love. It was disbelief. I can't believe I did that. I was in awe. I can't believe my baby's here. I can't believe my body did that. Like, what a big 3 days. Oh my God, she's here. Wow, what a journey. This whole thing has culminated in this. I'm in my living room. I just gave birth to my beautiful baby girl in my living room in the water. What? I trusted myself. I can't believe this has happened. There was just so much running through my head, but relief was definitely a big one, and love and just magic. And I checked, obviously I didn't know the sex at that stage, but I checked and I said, oh my God, it's a little baby girl. I was crying, my husband was crying, and the video, what I kept saying in this video was, we have a baby and I love you, I love you, I love you. They were sort of the phrases I was saying over and over, and I'm feeling emotional just thinking about that video. I've got like goosebumps. It was just I wish I could bottle that moment up. It was just, I'm going to get emotional actually. It was just amazing. And I was just on the biggest high, and I was just in bliss, like that oxytocin was pumping. And I just couldn't believe that we had done it and it had happened. You know, so many people had made me feel like I couldn't ever have a vaginal delivery. I had felt like my body was broken and that I couldn't do it. And it just felt incredible to be able to have trusted myself and shown myself that I could do it, and trusted my baby. And, you know, thinking back to when I was 10 weeks and I had that feeling of like, oh, you know, I think I can't walk into a surgery. I need to do this differently. And then that was the conclusion. It was amazing. So, yeah, I wish I could bottle that up. So that was my birth, and it was incredible. And then the after bit probably didn't go as smoothly as I had predicted, but it was fine and it was perfect, and it all worked out exactly as it was meant to. So what happened then is we couldn't quite visualize how she was coming out because I was really low in the birth pool. But what we think is that she presented what we call compound, where her hand is next to her head, because I did get a little bit of a tear. So there was some blood and some bleeding after birth, and we thought we'll get the placenta out and see if that slows down the bleeding. Otherwise, we'll call the ambulance, we'll go to hospital. And I was totally fine with that. Like I said, I was on a high. I was blissed out with oxytocin. I felt amazing. So then the placenta came out really easy. So I think I was in the pool for about 10 minutes just having cuddles and skin on skin, and she pooed all over me. I was covered in meconium. And we said, let's get out of the pool, let's birth the placenta, and let's see where this bleeding is. So I stood up and I just squatted down over a bowl in the pool and just had one contraction, and the placenta came out. So that was, touch wood, really easy. Came out and it was all great. Everything was fine. So we kept her connected. We wanted to do delayed cord clamping anyway. So there was no rush for that. And I got out of the pool and I sat on a chair, and we decided to call the ambulance because the bleeding was more than any of us had expected. And my doula, who has seen a lot of natural birth and normal birth, knew that this was not normal. So we thought, that's fine, let's call the ambulance. So the ambulance came, and again, I was still blissed out. I had no qualms about calling them or needing to transfer. I was not worried at all, but obviously there was an issue and we needed to sort it out. And I remember I was starving. So I had not eaten for like 2 days, and those natural confectionery snacks I was telling you about, I said to my doula, I'm finishing that packet before the ambulance comes. Give them all to me. So at one stage I was laughing. The ambulance were coming. I had I swear 4 snakes in my mouth, just trying to gobble them all up. Baby was on the breast. I was just like high on life, just like mouthful of snakes, trying to eat as much as I could before I got whisked away. So there was no rush with the ambulance because I looked well. I didn't look pale. I wasn't feeling dizzy. So we were taking, not taking our time, but it wasn't an emergency. It wasn't like we've got to go now. It was just like, okay, let's sort this all out. We cut the cord, and my husband did that. That was beautiful. And we were just starting to get ready to transfer to hospital. And I remember thinking, can I have a shower? Because I looked like a massacre. I was covered in blood. I was covered in meconium. I looked so dirty. And it's funny what you care about. And I just said to them, look, do you reckon I could have a quick shower? And I think everyone, like, there's 4 of us in the room, 2 Ambos, my husband, my doula, and they looked at me and they were like, who cares what you look like, girlfriend? Like, go to the friggin' hospital. And I just cared about cleaning myself. Anyway, so I put a dressing gown on, obviously cared less about the meconium and the blood on me. And we were getting ready to go, and I said, I just need to wash my hands. Like, my hands had meconium all over them. I was like, I can't go looking like this. Like, I have some standards. So they let me wash my hands. And I'm about to go out the door, and I remember saying to my husband, hey, did you get that peanut butter ball earlier? It's like one of my favorite balls from a cafe down the road. He's like, yeah. And I'm like, can you throw it to me? Because I'm starving. So I'm about to go out the door in this ambulance. And here I am, like, my husband's like lobbing a peanut butter ball to me. I'm tucking it in my pocket. It's just funny, the things you care about. I felt fine, which obviously made a big difference. I was in high spirits and I physically felt really well. I wasn't dizzy or feeling off. So I get in the ambulance and chatting to the ambulance driver. I had Luca on my chest, and he was explaining, like, we'd normally put oxygen on you, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, that's cool. I said, can I just have my peanut butter ball first? And he's like, oh, yeah, of course. Like, you just labor for 3 days. Like, have your peanut butter ball. So I'm sitting in the ambulance, like, chomping down on this peanut butter ball, having a chat about, like, his life and my life. And it's just funny. Anyway, we transferred to hospital. It was really wonderful. I wasn't sure what to expect. It was a little bit overwhelming at one stage because they were trying to identify where the bleeding was coming from. So a lot of people, it started with just me and a midwife, but then a lot of people came into the room once we realized that I was losing a fair amount of blood. And that was a bit overwhelming because, you go from this intimate, beautiful home birth environment with 2 other people to 16 people in the room asking you questions, asking for consent. And I did get a bit teary not because I was upset to be there or anything like that. Like, I knew I needed to be there and it was the right place for me to be, but more that I felt overwhelmed. Fair enough. And I knew that they had to do what they had to do because they were concerned. Long story short, the bleeding was not coming from my womb. So that was good. That was really good news. My placenta was fine and it all come out fine. And the bleeding was coming from an internal vaginal tear that I had. And so, like I was saying before about her coming out with her hand, that's because we couldn't visualize it, but that's the best explanation we could come up with as to why I would have had that internal tear. So she was 4 kilos. My first vaginal delivery, and touch wood, my perineum was intact, which people I think found quite surprising. So no perineal tears whatsoever, but I had this internal vaginal tear. Now, because the vagina is so vascular, it's a lot of blood vessels, I was losing a lot of blood from that tear. So it needed to be repaired surgically. So I went under a general, which I agreed to, over a spinal. They felt a general was going to be better anyway in terms of risk. And to be honest, I didn't really want to be awake while I was up in stirrups getting repaired. And I was exhausted. So part of me was like, you know what? I could go a really good nap right now. So it was only a half an hour or so surgery. So I wasn't away from my husband or Luca for very long. And I felt fine anyway. We'd had a feed. We'd had this beautiful skin on skin for probably, I think my surgery was about 2.5 hours after she was delivered. So we'd had 2.5 hours. She hadn't left my side. And I went and had surgery. That was all repaired and it was fine. I stayed 24 hours in hospital and it was a beautiful experience. Apart from hospital food was crap. That was so underwhelming. But apart from that, it was a beautiful experience. My recovery was very straightforward. Once they repaired the tear, the bleeding obviously stopped, so they weren't concerned anymore. They just wanted to monitor me to make sure I wasn't dizzy and didn't feel any effects of the blood loss. But touch wood, the whole time I had good colour and I felt really good, given I had lost quite a lot of blood. So I remember a doctor coming in the next morning and she said, how are you feeling? And I said, great. because truly I felt great. Like I wasn't in labor anymore, and I'd had this amazing, empowering birth experience. I had this beautiful baby girl next to me, and I'd eaten and I'd had some sleep, and I truly felt really good. And she looked at me and she said, "How are you really feeling?" And I said, "No, truly, I feel really good," because I think they were surprised. Given the amount of blood I had lost, I think they were surprised that whilst on paper I should have looked different, clinically I looked great and I felt good. So I was very fortunate that was all fairly straightforward. And then I came home, and that was my experience. And I will talk a little bit more about postpartum recovery and that in a separate episode. But it feels really good to have shared that. Breastfeeding, went really well, and she latched on pretty good. I'll talk about that in a separate episode as well. But I think that is mostly everything I want to share from the pregnancy and the birth story. I'm sure I've forgotten things. I'll probably do a Q&A follow-up to answer any extra questions, but I didn't expect to cry in there, so that was interesting. But there's something really cathartic about sharing this, something really practical about sharing this too, because in her birth book, I plan on writing for the birth story, refer to podcast. So when she's 18 and she wants to listen to a birth story, she can come back and listen to this. So it's a really practical way to record all the details. I know that all the details do get lost very quickly, so I know I want to record this before my memory starts to haze and I forget about all the details. But look, overall, the conclusion was this was not the pregnancy or birth I thought I was going to have. Not even close. But I think it's exactly the pregnancy and birth I needed to have. And I learned so many lessons. It was the ultimate personal growth and transformation experience for me. I truly feel like a different person. I feel like a different mother. I feel so lucky to have had the experience that I had. And I feel very blessed, and I feel very fortunate to have been able to go through this journey. Whilst it had many a down, it had so many ups. And like I said, I truly believe everything happens for a reason. I think every little fork in the road that happened along the way, it certainly wasn't a smooth journey. It wasn't a linear journey. It was all over the shop. But I think it all happened for a reason. And it's my story. And I hope you enjoyed listening. And I will follow it up with a postpartum recovery section and let you all know how that's going. But for anyone who's stuck around and listened to this whole thing, if you're a birth junkie like me, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. Thank you for letting me, share and get it off my chest and have a little cry and talk through it all. And thank you for being here. Hey mamas, Laura here, and I really hope you enjoyed the finale of my birth story. It truly was such a special time for me and my daughter, and one that I look back on so fondly. That moment of meeting her was so hard to describe, but one I feel so deeply in my bones, and I hope I never forget what that moment felt like. Now, if you enjoyed the episode or resonated with anything I shared, I would love to hear from you over on my socials at PhysioLaura, and I'd love to know what feelings and emotions you had when you first met your baby. In the next few episodes in my pregnancy and birth series, I'll be sharing what exercises I'm doing to recover after birth, how I'm feeling emotionally, my practical tips and tricks to help manage the day-to-day juggles with a family of 3 kids, and so much more. Now, I will catch you soon for episode 4 in this 7-part pregnancy and birth series, where I'll be sharing what I did in the first 2 weeks after birth to aid my recovery and transition smoothly to a family with 3 kids. Until then, mamas, sending you wonderful pregnancy vibes, and enjoy the incredible journey that is pregnancy.